Good evening. I'm Susan Spears, President and CEO of the Fredericksburg Regional Chamber of Commerce. Your chamber is proud to partner with the University of Mary Washington Student Government Association, the Freelance Star, and the Fredericksburg Area League of Women's Voters, along with our great friend Ted Schubel here with the radio station. Tonight is a crucial time in our nation's history. Today's issues are complex and must be reviewed in a common sense, bipartisan manner. We turn to our elected leaders to seek solutions for all during these difficult times and beyond. We commend the candidates before us for their willingness to serve in the Commonwealth, and we look forward to hearing their remarks. With no further ado, I will now introduce our candidates for Virginia's 7th Congressional District. Derek Anderson is a native of Spotsylvania County. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science from Virginia Tech and a Juris Doctorate from Georgetown University Law Center. He served in the U.S. Army, including as a Special Forces Green Beret from 2006 to 2014, completing 5 deployments to Afghanistan, Bahrain, Jordan, Israel, and Lebanon. Anderson has also worked on civil and criminal cases as a clerk for 2 federal judges and in the White House during the administration of former President Donald Trump in the Office of National Drug Control Policy. He is a practicing attorney and currently serves as a major in the Army National Guard. He lives in Spotsylvania with his dog Ranger, who is a Dalmatian. Eugene Vindman was born in Ukraine. His family arrived in New York City in 1979 as refugees, and he attended public schools in Brooklyn, New York. He earned a bachelor's degree from State University of New York, Binghamton, a master's degree from Central Michigan University, and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Georgia. Vindman is a retired colonel who served in the U.S. Army from 1997 through 2022, including in the Judge Advocate General's Corps, where he traveled extensively and worked as a prosecutor. He also served as a legal advisor for the U.S. National Security Council. He lives in Woodbridge with his wife Cindy, and the couple has 2 children. I will now turn the program over to Dr. Stephen Farnsworth, our MC for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. The way that we have developed this debate and the candidates have agreed to the format involves a coin toss backstage. And candidate Anderson will be giving the first opening statement, followed by candidate Vindman. They each have 2 minutes. Our timekeepers have the signs to give the candidates a sense of when their time is about up. There is a green card for 30 seconds. There's a yellow card for 15, and then a red card for 0. The candidates will be able to see this up front, and so this is how it will work. The candidate will be able to speak. We'll make an exception to the no applause rule for the opening statements and the closing statements, but applause during the question and answer period of our remarks will involve the deduction of time against the candidate who's being favored by that applause. We also want to remind everyone that in order to provide an unobstructed view of the proceedings for everyone, that it's important that you do not show signs or otherwise banners and demonstrate to give everyone a clear chance to see what's going on. Please respect the rules that the candidates themselves have agreed to. And with that, I want to thank the candidates for being willing to do this. It's an important service, a public service for these candidates to be willing to serve us in Congress. And so, candidate Anderson, 2 minutes. The floor is yours.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Derek Anderson. I'm running to be your next congressman here in Virginia's 7th Congressional District. I grew up in Spotsylvania County, just right down the road. I started my career off in my mom's restaurants. If you want to ask, her restaurant was Whistle Stop, and she did promote me to a cook. So if you ever ate a burger at the Whistle Stop, that was my mom, and that was the kid in the back. I graduated from Cortland High School before going to Virginia Tech on an ROTC scholarship, where I was the first in my family to graduate from college. I then joined the Army. While I was in the Army, I was an infantryman, went to Ranger School, and then deployed for 15 months as part of the surge. Following that, I went to the Honor Guard in Arlington National Cemetery, where I did about 150 funerals in Arlington National Cemetery, which was one of the biggest honors of my life. I then earned my Green Beret. I led 2 Special Forces teams over the course of 5 deployments, including Afghanistan, Bahrain, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan. I got out, went to law school, and clerked for 2 federal judges. Folks, what got me into this was seeing the botched withdrawal in Afghanistan. I lost 5 of my guys in Afghanistan, so as you can imagine, I was pretty upset with the lack of accountability on behalf of the current administration. Look, folks, I'm a common sense kind of guy. I want to make sure that it's more affordable for people to live in our district and get our economy back on track. I want to make sure that our border is secure and our foreign policy is strong so we can make our communities safe. I also want to make sure that we take care of our veterans. That's the kind of person I am. And folks, you're going to see a lot of things and hear a lot of things tonight, but I want to be clear. My opponent's focused on his past. He's focused on his revenge tour with President Trump and trying to rectify the failed policies of the Biden-Harris administration. Well, I'm focused on the future. So it'd be an honor not only represent the people here in the 7th Congressional District, but it'd be an honor to be your next congressman and represent the people that raised me. Thank you.
Candidate Vindman, your opening statement, 2 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel, Professor Farnsworth, for hosting this event. It's very important that we have a democratic discourse here. I want to thank the audience for being here. Your passion for our democracy is fantastic. Last, I want to thank my family because for me, this is all about family. So, who am I? My name is Eugene Vindman. I'm a husband, a father. I'm an Army vet of the Iraq War. I'm also an immigrant. I came to this country in 1979 with a family of 5. We had less than $800 between all of us, but we did have each other and the American dream. When I was old enough, I joined the Army out of a profound sense of patriotism. I spent 25 years in the Army, serving first as an airborne infantry platoon leader in the 82nd. Then, after law school, I was a prosecutor, a law war advisor, and I was a legal advisor on the National Security Council. So I went from platoon leader to the White House in my career. And frankly, it was amazing for me to serve in that capacity. That experience, that judgment, that maturity, that's what I bring to this job. Why am I doing this? Like I said, my motivation is family. And there are some critically important issues in this race. Number one is the fundamental right to health care, women's health care in the form of abortion. A little over 2 years ago, that right, that constitutional right, was taken away from women. I have a 14-year-old daughter. She has less rights than women have enjoyed for decades. And after serving 25 years in the Army, that just does not sit well with me. So we have to restore those fundamental rights. And second, look, I'm a dad, a local dad. I live in Prince William County. I'm raising my family there. I'm very sensitive to the costs of housing, gas, groceries, and we have to address those, and those will be my priorities on day one in Congress. Thank you for your support.
We'll now turn to the question and answer portion of our debate. For each question, the first person who answers the question has a 2-minute response. The next respondent will have 1 minute, and then there's an optional 30-second rebuttal to the first candidate if the first candidate wishes. We will alternate so that each candidate will have an equal number of times when they answer the first question. The first question will go to candidate Anderson. The questions will be asked by Ted Schubel, the news director of WFVA Radio, Rosalind Cooperman, she is chair of the Department of Political Science at the University of Mary Washington, and Jake Woolmer, the managing editor of the Freelance Star. I, as moderator, will also ask questions that have been provided by the audience, and so there will be an opportunity for your participation through those audience questions that have already been provided to us. So now, Ted, to candidate Anderson, 2 minutes for the response, then 1 minute after that.
We will start off with the economy. We all are feeling the impacts of inflation, gas prices, food prices, car insurance, property assessments. What can be done at the congressional level to bring costs down?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Look, there's no question right now that the economy is not working for folks, not only in the 7th District or in the Commonwealth, but across the nation. Look, I'll tell you a story about a little girl who wrote me a letter. Her name is Ella. Ella, are you out there? Hi, Ella. Ella wrote me a letter, and in her letter she said, "Derek, can you fix the government so my mom can buy snacks again?" Well, Ella, when we win in November, we're going to make sure mom can buy snacks again. Look, folks, right now we're seeing the economy is just not working for folks. In the Commonwealth of Virginia alone, we see that about a third of Virginians are living paycheck to paycheck. We see that about a quarter of Virginians are delinquent on their credit card bills because why? They're paying for gas and groceries where they used to pay for big, large items, and they're not able to pay off their credit card. We see the average Virginia family right now spending about $1,100 more a month under Bidenomics. It's just not working for folks. Look, we need to make sure we balance the budget. Look, I'm a staunch supporter. If you go up to Washington, D.C. and you don't get your job done as a member of Congress and balance the budget, you don't get paid. It's a pretty simple concept. We want to make sure we keep taxes low. We need to make sure we stop the overspending that the U.S. government continues to do day in and day out, and we got to get U.S. energy back up and running. And that's how we're going to get our economy back on track immediately. Look, my opponent has some of the most extreme liberal radical policies that are supported by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Look, it's a simple question. Are you better off 4 years ago than you were today? I'd say the answer is no. So why would you vote for somebody to go up there and do 4 more years of the same old, same old? Look, folks, we need to quit the spending. We need to make sure we get normal policies back into place so that we can make it more affordable to live. And that's the bottom line.
I remind you about our rules. 1 minute. Candidate Vindman.
Thank you. Look, I'm a family man. I'm raising my family in Prince William County. I'm very sensitive to the cost of housing, drugs, and groceries in the supermarket. There are 2 supermarket chains in Prince William County that control 40% of the market. That is too much consolidation. Frankly, it verges on a monopoly. There is a merger now pending of 2 very large supermarket chains. The market's not working. What we need to do is make sure that the economy is working, that capitalism functions the way it's supposed to by preventing monopolies from taking shape. The second thing is, look, insulin is now $35 because there's a cap on the price. That's a huge first step in making life more affordable for the average American, average citizen. We need to expand that across the board. We need to make more drugs affordable, life-saving drugs for the voters in this district. And I'm all for an all-above energy policy.
30-second rebuttal, if you like.
I'd like to take my 30-second rebuttal. Look, folks, what you just heard is a lot of nothing. Look, what he just talked about is he wants to put price caps on groceries. That's what he's talking about. Look, I've visited multiple grocery stores throughout the district, and you know why they're paying so much right now? Because energy. I've talked to places in Spotsylvania County all the way up to Prince William counties like Jimmy's Stop and Shop or Toto's Market. And the number one thing they say, the reason why their prices keep going up, the lights, trying to keep the lights on. Look, we got to get U.S. energy back up and running to make our economy work for everyone, not only in the country or not only the Commonwealth of Virginia, but here in the 7th.
The next question from Dr. Cooperman goes first to candidate Vindman.
Each of you comes from a military background, and the 7th Congressional District has thousands of active and retired duty military families. How has your military experience informed your beliefs about the role of the United States in addressing conflicts in places like the Middle East or Ukraine?
Look, I spent 25 years in the Army. I'm extremely proud of my service. My brothers and sisters over the course of those 25 years helped me get through. So the first thing I will do is commit to making sure that veterans get the services that they need. That's ironclad. There are plans out there, like Project 2025, that my opponent, who's funded by extremists, he'll vote down the line. The bottom line, that reduces veterans' benefits. I think that's unacceptable. I find that unacceptable. There are lots of other goodies in 2025. I'm sure we're going to talk about it. But look, I spent 25 years in the Army as a paratrooper all the way up through a White House official. I have the experience, I have the judgment, I have the knowledge, having advised at that level, to serve in Congress from day one. The character traits that I bring with me are integrity, judgment, and dedication to duty. That's what happens when you serve 25 years in the Army, and that's why I'm prepared to serve in Congress on behalf of all members, or everybody in the 7th Congressional District.
1 minute.
Yeah, you're going to hear my opponent say this over and over again tonight, so we might as well nip it in the bud now. Look, he keeps talking about Project 2025. That's not my plan. I didn't know about it until my opponent continued to talk about it over and over again. This is absolute. Look, folk, what we see right now is we see weak leadership. I was a Green Beret. I served our nation for a little over a decade. I still serve our nation. I was a Green Beret. I literally led men in combat. I know exactly what it feels like to have those rounds whiz by your head. I've lost guys. I've had friends that have lost guys. What we need is true leadership. We see the chaos going on across the world right now, and it's because of the weak leadership and the extreme policies of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and people like my opponent. If we look at what just happened yesterday, Iran is firing onto Israel with no repercussions, and it's because of the failed leadership at the top.
30-second rebuttal.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, we have rules that the campaigns have agreed to, and it's important that the candidates are treated with the rules in which they agreed to, and that includes not heckling and not applauding. I would encourage you, if you wish to be a candidate for office, you can be on the stage, qualify for the ballot, and 2 years from now, we'll have you on the stage. But for now, your job is to be an audience member, not a candidate. Thirty-second rebuttal, if you like.
Sure, absolutely. Look, if my opponent has not heard of Project 2025, then he is very much out of touch with this district. It is a topic that comes up at meet and greets, at church, in every location. I've stopped people on the street knocking doors. They know what Project 2025 is. They're nervous about it. They don't want any part of it. You know how you prevent Project 2025 from being implemented? Don't vote for my opponent. He's bankrolled by MAGA extremists, and they want a return on their investment.
Jake, you have the next question. It goes first to candidate Anderson.
What is the greatest national security threat facing the U.S., and what should be done about it?
Yeah, so I look at it from two different angles. I do believe that the border issue is seriously a national security issue. But from outside the United States, I truly do think that what is going on with Iran is seriously a national security threat. Look, we saw yesterday that Iran throw hundreds of missiles over into Israel. They've been emboldening our enemies, whether it be Russia and China. We see the fact that they have the Houthis over in Yemen. We see the fact that they have Hezbollah in southern Lebanon firing into Israel pretty much daily at this point. And we see the chaos that's ensued. Look, I can tell you, as a former Green Beret, I still have Green Beret brothers of mine that are still serving overseas in places like Iraq and in Syria. And I can tell you, because of the failed policies of the current administration, who my opponent 100% supports, and that weak leadership, we have our service members that are getting attacked. Since October 7th, we've had over 100 attacks on our service members and our military installations overseas. That hurts me, especially when my Green Beret brothers are telling me that when they're getting attacked, they're being told from higher up that they have to sit on their hands and they're not allowed to reattack. That's not how we did business when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's time that we start getting strong leadership. Look, 4 years ago, we weren't in this mess. We didn't have wars across the world. We didn't have Ukraine being invaded. Again, though, my opponent is focused on his past. You heard him. You heard him really briefly talk about, all he talks about is Donald Trump, and he has a revenge tour against Donald Trump. He doesn't talk about the issues that are actually impacting us in the district. In fact, he's trying to rectify the failed policies of the Kamala Harris and Joe Biden administration that got us into the mess right now. So again, we need strong leadership from a foreign policy and across the world, so people like countries like Russia, Iran do not feel emboldened to not only attack our allies overseas, but to attack our U.S. military installations overseas as well.
Candidate Vindman, 1 minute.
Well, look, this is a perfect example of the difference between the experience and knowledge that I have in my opponent. Not once did he mention the Chinese Communist Party and China. That is the most serious existential threat that we face in the long term. The most acute threat right now is Russia. So let's talk about Russia and China. Yes, the news of the day is about Iran, and let's take it seriously. But the most serious threat we face is from Russia and China. They're the only ones capable of posing a threat to the United States. And so let's talk about pushing back against China. Let's talk about pushing back against Russia. My opponent and the MAGA extremists in his party are isolationists. What they would have is they would have us turn inward like it is in the 1930s. That's not possible anymore. We step back. You know who fills that vacuum? Russia and China. We have to push back vigorously on those threats, prepare for those threats, and you need people with the knowledge and judgment and understanding of having served at the highest levels to perceive those threats and take them on.
30-second rebuttal.
30 seconds. Yeah, you mentioned he tried to distinguish between us and the differences. Look, I'll tell you the differences. I tell you the truth about my service and what I've done. I can tell you that my opponent has lied not only about things about me, but he's lied about his own military service. He's lied about being a colonel. He's not a colonel. He's lied about his time in combat. I actually saw combat. My opponent said that he used weapons of war in combat when he knows very well he did not. I was a former Green Beret who actually saw combat. So if you want to see the difference between a true try-hard combat veteran, I'm the guy.
I would like to respond to that
A
attack.
reminder, I would encourage you to use the next question to start your response with a response at that point. We have a lot of issues to cover. This next question goes first to candidate Vindman. It is a question offered by our co-sponsor, the Chamber of Commerce. Where do you stand on the current union strike at critical ports around the East Coast? This potentially can hurt small business as well as trigger cost hikes. 2 minutes to candidate Vindman.
All right, so happy to answer that question, but first let me address this issue of Derek lying about my record. He's lying about my record just like he's lying and trying to fool the voters in this district about his fake family. I mean, if you are going to lie about something as fundamental as your family, you're going to try to portray yourself as a family man so people like you, how can you be trusted on more serious topics? It's unacceptable, and you know why he's doing it? I'll tell you why. Because he wants to distract from the important issues in this race, like abortion, like reproductive freedom, and like, I mean, let's move on to actually important issues like the one that's being talked about. So look, there's a strike right now, and the president has weighed in. Basically, this is the first few days of the strike. I think we need to give the unions and the corporations that are running these ports, the longshoremen, the opportunity to work this out, but not a long opportunity. You know, we're just a few months away from the holiday season. Our economy is still fragile. I'm very sensitive to cost, as I told you, as a family man, local in this area. We need to focus on making sure that there's a quick resolution. I'd give them an opportunity to work it out, the longshoremen and the corporations, but if they don't, in short order, I'd bring them in and make sure that they negotiate through this.
1 minute.
Well, let's talk about, he mentioned my family. Yevgeny, my family is right there, and I encourage you to go talk to my mom after this and see what she has to say to you. Look, I have a beautiful fiance right here that is also a veteran as well. Look, what he's talking about is unbelievable. He talks about focusing on a picture that I took with supporters in the district. Why is he talking about that? Again, we talk about distracting from the issues. Good grief, folks. That you can't have anything more than just distracting from the issues. That's my family right there. He's distracting because he's lying about his military record, and he won't answer it. I'm answering it. That's my family. Folks, what we're talking about right now...
We encourage you to give the time.
We have union workers right now. Why are they strike? They want higher wages? Because the economy is not working for anyone in the United States right now. We are feeling it in Virginia. We're feeling it across the United States. And my opponent would be a rubber stamp for those policies that got us into this mess in the first place. I know he doesn't care about the district. I care about the district because my family and friends and the people that I've known my entire life live in this district, and I'll do everything I can in Congress to make life more affordable for you.
30-second rebuttal.
Well, look, somehow my opponent has managed to make himself a laughingstock. He's gone viral nationally and internationally. And you know, this district deserves more. This district deserves serious leadership rather than somebody that will attempt to portray himself as a family man, posing with his friends, wife, and kids. How can anybody trust anything you have to say on the important topics of the day, abortion, the economy, if you can't tell the truth?
The next question is an audience question, and it goes first to candidate Anderson. Are you willing to share how your faith informs your desire to be in public service and your desire to further justice for all?
Yeah, I'll be quite honest. When I was growing up, I oftentimes didn't have the opportunity to go to church because I was usually at my mom's restaurants. I was usually working with her. She couldn't afford childcare, so quite often I was with my mom, and I was fortunate enough to have a friend in Spotsylvania who lived right down the street to me, and he started bringing me to church and gave me the opportunity. At first, look, I'll be quite honest, I went there because they were giving free donuts and orange juice, and then they started talking about God, and I thought that was actually amazing. Look, my faith carried me not only through high school and in college and through the military. Look, I saw some of the most horrendous things that you can imagine overseas. I was in combat. I've lost guys over there. I've had some of the most low moments in my life overseas in these combat areas in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I'll tell you, having my faith there was the thing that kept me going. Being able to look up to the Lord and say, hey, I'm on your plan, sir. Keep me going. That's what got me through all of those 15-month combat deployment to Iraq. It got me through a 6-month deployment to Afghanistan and the 4 other deployments I did throughout the Middle East. Look, I go to a lot of our churches across the district, and I'll tell you, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, an independent, red, blue. Right now, people are hurting. People are hurting. The economy is just killing them. Not only that, but we see the national security risk. We have 250 people coming across the border that are on a national security list. Our communities are unsafe right now. Look, God and my faith has carried me through multiple deployments and carried me across a 10-plus year military career on active duty and almost 18 now. Look, I live in the Lord, and I go to church as much as almost every Sunday. During the campaign, it's gotten a little busy. So, again, I'm happy that my mom and my family were there for me and pushed me into that direction.
1 minute.
Sure. So the reason I'm in the United States, the reason why I'm a refugee in the United States is because I come from a Jewish household. So my family and I know what it's like to leave a bigoted communist dictatorship because of anti-Semitism. That's why we came here. And we came here because this country is generous to immigrants and refugees like myself, that we are now in a position to pay that back. All of my brothers, all 4 of us, joined the military. We served proudly and honorably, and frankly, I think that's a great return on investment. I will say that I've had the opportunity to visit, at this point, dozens of faith communities throughout the district, and it's really been an honor and a great opportunity for me to listen to different communities, understand where people are coming from, and I'm really enjoying that part of this campaign. Thank you.
30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, and just be very clear, I think this is something that Yevgeny and I can agree with on this, on faith, that it's carried us through. Look, this election cycle is going to be pretty crazy. I think that everyone can agree that every single day there's a new news cycle. And I think that we always forget that at the end of the day, everyone in this room, and I know people are on different sides of the aisle and what have you, but at the end of the day, we're all Americans here. We all want to see the best for our country. We all want to see the best for our communities. And truly, that's what I'm here to do, and that's what I'm here to talk about tonight. So thank you.
Ted has the first question going with Mr. Vindman.
Mr. Vindman, on the abortion issue, where do you stand on the abortion debate?
Well, look, this is the most important issue in this race. Why? Because it affects women's fundamental freedoms. 2 years ago and change, there was a constitutional right to an abortion. Women controlled their bodies, and that right is now lost. My daughter has fewer rights than women have enjoyed for generations. And again, as somebody who defended Americans' rights and freedoms, that just does not sit well with me. So the questions that must be answered, and frankly, my opponent has dodged up to this point, are 2. 1, will he restore Roe? Will he restore women's reproductive rights and freedoms to what they were, where they are entitled to health care? My sister-in-law had a series of ectopic pregnancies. You know what the treatment for that is? It would be considered an abortion. There are women dying around the country now because they don't have access to this fundamental right. So my opponent has not answered this question head on. He needs to answer the question of whether he would restore Roe, restore women's fundamental rights. And 2, I would like to hear him say definitively that he would vote against a national abortion ban.
Just a second, if you would. I want to remind all of you that you need to be neighborly to the people who want to hear this debate. So your comments that disturb the people next to you can't hear the answer. And so I really want to encourage people to do the respect that your fellow members of this community deserve. I'll now turn to candidate Anderson. 1 minute.
Yeah, my mom had me at a very young age. She was 18 years old when she had me. And my mom's happy she had me, and I'm glad that she had me. Look, the Dobbs decision was clear. It gave this right back to states to make decisions that fit the states. And in fact, Virginia has spoken on this issue, but my opponent will continue to lie, whether it be on media or what have you, about my position on this. I'll be very clear. I do not want to refederalize this issue, so I will not support a national ban on abortion. I will support IVF. My brother is using IVF right now because I want to make sure that he has an opportunity to have a kid, and I do support over-the-counter contraceptives. But my opponent continues to lie over and over about my position on this. Why? Because he can't talk about the other issues. He can't talk about the economy. He can't talk about the border. He can't talk about anything else. But I want to be very clear. My opponent will be one of the most far-left radical people in Congress that Virginia's ever seen. He would support what, like Ralph Northam did, government-funded abortions up until and even after birth. Governor Northam said he would make them comfortable. And my opponent would support those policies.
30-second rebuttal.
Look, I guess as somebody who's been a prosecutor, I will say that's murder, so that's also a lie. Derek is lying to you about my positions on this because, again, did you notice he didn't answer the question? Will he restore women's reproductive rights? He didn't answer that question. But I'm going to keep pushing him tonight, and I'm going to do my best to make sure he answers.
The next question goes first to candidate Anderson.
As we saw from the recent devastation wrought by Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, extreme weather events are no longer uncommon. What is your position on climate change, and what is the appropriate role of the federal government to help folks and states when these disasters occur?
Yeah, so I absolutely understand that there is climate change, right? I understand that we want to all make sure that our environment and our communities are safe and flourishing and that we're not destroying it. What I think this really comes down to is energy, though. We need to really talk about energy and the fact that how it's being used and what we're doing, because right now our economy is struggling because we're not energy independent. Look, we could get our economy back on track by being energy independent immediately. In fact, we've seen that what we're doing right now is that we are a net import rather than a net export on oil. We're buying more oil overseas than we are creating here. What does that do? Well, look, if we want to talk about preserving our climate and our environment, let's stop buying oil and gas from countries overseas that don't have the regulations that we do in the United States. We should be producing it here so we can monitor and make sure that it's clean energy. Look, my opponent and his party have been on the wrong side of this issue. They've had some of the most extreme, radical, liberal policies when it comes to energy. In fact, my opponent would support it, an electric vehicle mandate. He would support a mandate that requires you to give up your gas-powered vehicles and your gas stoves for an electric vehicle that you can't afford. It would cost us $1 trillion more in taxes to have that. In fact, we'd be given $7,500 in tax credit because China's borrowing our money or buying up our debt right now, and then we'd be given $7,500 back to him to buy a lithium battery that China, again, is creating. He talks about China being an existential threat, but he wants to give our money over to China. Look, the Kamala Harris-Joe Biden regimen of energy right now is not working. In fact, in the first few days of their administration, they made sure that leases couldn't be bought for oil. They made sure that we couldn't export natural gas, and that killed our energy policies immediately. We want to talk about why gas prices are up than they were 4 years ago. There's your answer.
1 minute.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I heard how Mr. Anderson plans to address climate change, but I'm glad to hear that he at least recognized it because that's fairly out of step with most of his party. Look, first, I guess you'd have to trust Mr. Anderson at his word, which, again, that's your decision to make. But Project 2025 takes a different position. And you would have to trust that Derek Anderson would stand up to his MAGA funders, bankrollers, and that he would vote out of lockstep with his party. And that's a huge risk. You know how you mitigate that risk? You don't vote for Mr. Anderson. Look, this country is producing more energy than ever, We do need to have an all-of-the-above energy approach. We need to do that until we are able to transition fully to clean energy, including nuclear energy. I'm frankly a big proponent of nuclear energy, gas, solar, wind. These are the steps we have to take in order to address climate change. Thank you.
30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, you heard it again, folks. My opponent is focused on his past. He's focused on his revenge tour with Donald Trump and trying to rectify the failed policy. You said, oh, well, Derek didn't give, I just gave a whole list of policies that we could do to get our energy policy. You gave nothing except for don't vote. Look, this is absolutely horrendous that he's not even focused on the future of this country and the focus on this district. Look, why? Because right now we have leadership in the White House that they just showed up to the locations down in Southwest Virginia. Our Attorney General in Virginia and our governor have been down there day in and day out, and the current leadership is nowhere to be found.
The next question goes first to candidate Vindman. Jake.
With the U.S. over $30 trillion in debt, what spending should be cut to reduce deficits?
Well, look, I think it's important that we remember that the previous administration grew our national debt by $5.8 trillion. $5.8 trillion. That's more spending than I think certainly in the 19th century, but maybe all presidents combined to raise the debt that high. So let's recognize that that's how we ended up in this position. But we do need to cut debt. We need to be cognizant of the fact that our debt situation long-term is unsustainable. So, look, I'm very much in favor of cutting fat where appropriate, cutting regulations where appropriate, and we need to generate more revenue. But it can't be on the backs of the working class, my friends and neighbors in the 7th Congressional District. Let's think about the tax regime. In 2017, 80% of the benefit went to the top 1%. You know what? In the next Congress, the next member of Congress to represent the 7th Congressional District is going to be deciding what the taxes look like. And from my perspective, I think we need to make sure that the 80% get the vast majority of the tax benefits and not the top 1%.
Yeah, let's talk about spending. Look, I'll be the first to say Republicans and Democrats need to stop with the overspending. Both administrations, for the last few years, we continue. That's why we're $42 trillion in debt. But I'll tell you what, as a former Green Beret, as someone who knows what it means to conduct a mission and go out and do combat operations, when I say I'm going to do something, you'll have my word. We're going to make sure we cut spending. And look, I'll tell you, my opponent and his far-left radical policies are going to increase spending 100%. In fact, we know that because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris spent $7 trillion right off the bat in their administration. In fact, my opponent would support an EV mandate, like I mentioned, that would cost the American taxpayers $1 trillion. Look, folks, we got to cut the overspending because the more that the government is spending, the less money we have in our pockets. If we want to talk about cutting spending, I'd encourage my opponent to talk about some of these policies that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden want to implement on day one.
Yeah, again, I did not hear a single idea of how we get our debt under control because it's all about talking points and scare tactics. Let's talk about something serious. First of all, you know, Derek, you keep distorting my position because you want to distract from the issues at hand, okay? So how are we supposed to believe anything you say when you can't fundamentally portray yourself as who you are? You're a D.C. corporate attorney that defends pharmaceutical companies.
The next question goes first to candidate Anderson. It's an audience question. This is from a mother whose first grader just came home from his first lockdown drill at a local elementary school. She says that the lockdown drills and the state of gun safety in the schools is traumatizing children. Her question is, what are you going to do to deal with gun violence in the schools?
Yeah, so what we need to start thinking about is gun regulations because what my opponent will say is he wants to take all your guns away. Look, what we need to start thinking about is making sure that we don't take guns away from lawful citizens. And we're taking guns away from people like criminals and people with severe mental illnesses. Look, let's talk about what's happened over the last couple of months with the school shootings and some of the assassination attempts that we've seen. Look, what we're seeing right now is that the FBI knew a lot about this beforehand, and we knew that the individuals had mental health issues. So I think the first thing we got to do is we got to start getting funding for mental health. We got to make sure we get funding for mental health. As somebody who's a service member, who's a veteran, who gets their health care from the VA, who served with Green Berets and people in the Army throughout my career, I can tell you a lot of my buddies that have come home overseas, it didn't work out for them because they didn't have the mental health, whether they be civilians or in the military, the mental health facilities and funding in order. I've had a buddy I went to college with that committed suicide coming back from deployment. So we got to get this mental health issue back under control, and we got to stop making it a stigma. Look, I'll tell you what my opponent and his party, what they've done time and time again. My opponent and his party have continuously voted against legislation that would support funding for mental health. My opponent and his party and his far-left radical extreme agenda would voted against enhancing the penalty for criminals that commit crimes with weapons, i.e., if you got armed robbery versus robbery, it's the same thing, and they voted against that. In fact, my opponent and his party were the proponents of defunding the police and taking SROs out of our schools. Look, I had a resource officer in my school when I was growing up. He was awesome. We loved him. And he also was great because he helped recruiting. When we see our law enforcement right now is at an all-time low when it comes with recruiting. Look, these are the type of extreme policies my opponent is talking about because he's focused on his past with Donald Trump and not focused on the future.
1 minute.
Yeah, so, look, I spent 25 years in the Army. I've fired everything from a pistol to a cannon. I'm a responsible gun owner. I'm not looking to take anybody's guns away, okay? But there are some fundamental issues at stake here. I have 2 kids in public schools. My son had a school lockdown because somebody brought a gun and it went off. That's traumatic to parents. We can't have that. My daughter so far twice has had drills on how to learn how to survive rather than learning math, science, and reading. That is unacceptable. There are policies that over 80% of the country can agree on. Safe storage, red flag laws, closing the gun show loophole. These are common steps that we should take today, and unless you're in the pocket of the gun lobby, like my opponent and his MAGA bankrollers, there is no reason for you not to follow this. And look, I've been a prosecutor. I believe in law and order, and you know, if somebody violates the law, then we prosecute them.
3-second rebuttal.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you heard him. You heard it straight from the horse's mouth. He's going to be one of the most extreme, radical politicians that's ever lived. Look, this individual just said he wants to take weapons away from law-abiding citizens. That's what he said. That's what he was saying underneath of it. Look, folks, we got it. I can agree with Yevgeny on this one that we do have to have common sense policies, but we shouldn't be taking weapons out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. We need to make sure we're taking care and funding mental health to make sure that bad people don't have guns.
Once again, I want to remind everyone that both candidates agreed to a system when people would not be commenting and otherwise trying to talk over the candidates. Both candidates agreed to this. Both candidates, I hope, will join me in asking for proper behavior from their own supporters. I want to move to the next question goes first to candidate Vindman. The current U.S. minimum wage is now $7.25 an hour, and it has been at that level for quite some time. Do you support or oppose an increase in the minimum wage, and why or why not?
Yeah, first, let me echo what Professor Farnsworth said. I'm going to ask my supporters to please be civil and cordial so we can get through this debate and you can hear where both of us stand. So look, the minimum wage has not changed in, I don't know, a decade and a half. There are people that are, you can't survive on a wage in certain parts of the country. I mean, think about this district. If you're making $7 and change, you're not going to survive on that. With housing prices so high, with costs for groceries high and gas prices high, I mean, it's great to see gas prices go below $3. That's a good first step, but we're not there yet. So we definitely need an increase to a living wage. I think $15 an hour is a good step. And, you know, the workers deserve this. Corporations are making record profits these days. They're making record profits. The grocery store chains that I talked about earlier, Those grocery stores chains are making record profits. They're paying their folks minimum wage, occasionally slightly better than minimum wage. We need to make sure that we're taking care of workers. Our economy is still 2/3 based on consumers. You know how we make sure that corporations continue to make profits and our economy thrives? Make sure that we're paying our employees so they can continue to spend money.
Yeah, folks, look, what we're looking at right now, I travel the district quite often, and I talk to a lot of our local businesses, a lot of our local grocery stores, and one of the things I mentioned, what Mr. Vindman's asking is to pay more when our grocery stores and our gas stations and our businesses don't have the funds right now to stay up above water. Look, I can tell you that a lot of our local businesses right now, they can't afford to stay above water because they're paying high cost for energy. They're paying increased cost of goods. We see the fact that goods are up 21% more than they were under the Biden-Harris administration. Look, these are the type of things. If we want to get minimum wage back up, let's have a great economy and a thriving business in the United States of America and have businesses competing, because when they're competing, they're making more money and they're giving it back to their people. Look, my opponent wants to sit here and put price caps on groceries. He wants to tax unrealized gains. So if you're even thinking about making money, my opponent wants to tax you for it. Look, the best way we can get businesses back up and running is making sure we get energy independent and make sure our economy is back on track.
30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, look, again, corporations are making record profits. Our economy is based on consumer spending. Workers need to see some of those profits back in their pocketbooks so they can work, survive, and live. My family came to the United States very modest means, and my dad's union job, his benefits that allowed us to live with health insurance, boys with cut, scrapes, and broken bones were critical. Unions are, frankly, a great start, increasing the minimum wage. These are the steps we need to protect our workers.
The next question goes
I get a
first.
30-second on that?
I'm sorry, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Look, what you're hearing from my opponent is pretty astonishing. By his policies, we'd be forcing companies overseas. We'd be forcing jobs and companies overseas, or if they did decide to stay here because of the policies he'd want to implement, we would increase inflation. Why? Because we'd be forcing companies to do things, and then they would put that cost back down onto the consumer, and we would actually see wages decrease. Again, we need to make sure that companies are staying here in the United States, that we're made in America, and that we have a great economy for these companies to thrive.
The next question goes first to candidate Anderson. Ted.
Let's talk term limits. Term limits for Congress, term limits for the Supreme Court. Your thoughts?
Look, I'll just be quite frank. I would support term limits. The problem is that it's never going to happen. Look, I would love to go back to making money for the first time in my life again, because I literally just started it. Then I decided I wanted to run for Congress. But look, I mean, we look at the history of our nation and the traditions of our nation. We look at that when our politicians were initially starting off. One, they tended to pass away earlier. Right? And a lot of politicians didn't go sit up in Washington, D.C. and hang out all the time. They went back to their farms or their businesses or things like that. So, look, I think that there's something to be said about it. I just don't think that there's going to be enough votes in Congress in order for there to be term limits. But, again, we can talk about a lot of different issues, including term limits. I think the Supreme Court, I mean, my opponent would try to attack the Supreme Court. That's what him and his party have talked about all the time, which is an absolutely extreme liberal policy. Look, the Supreme Court is 9 justices. Congress can change it if they choose to, but that's what it's been, and that's what it's going to continue. That's why we have separation. We have separation of powers. We have an executive agency. We have a court system, a judicial, and we have Congress, right? And it's meant to so that we can balance these things out. Again, balancing things out in a true time of divisiveness is the best case scenario that we could have right now.
1 minute.
Look, I guess I would start with this. After 25 years in the Army, I have a spouse-imposed term limit. So the long and short is that we need term limits because we need to have fresh ideas. We may not get there, but that doesn't mean we don't attempt to implement term limits. I think, we can negotiate where you can have a discussion about whether term limits are necessary or how long they are. But the bottom line is the way the government was designed, the way the legislature, Congress was designed, it was never meant to be a career. And so I think we ought to have a discussion about term limits, and it's an important topic, and we shouldn't just gloss over it because it's too hard to do. Just because something's too hard to do doesn't mean you don't try to do it.
Sorry, a second.
Yeah, and just we'll talk briefly about it, but look, yeah, I think that term limits are something that could be an issue. But again, I think that right now, term limits are obviously not an unimportant issue, but I think that right now, the people in the 7th District, the people in the Commonwealth of Virginia, they're hurting when it comes to the economy. We're seeing illegal immigration coming through at skyrocketing rates. Over millions of people are here. I think there's some other things that we can be focusing on as soon as this Congress is elected and takes control in January, that we could get our country back on track.
The next question goes first to candidate Vindman. Awesome.
During the presidential debate last month, Donald Trump stated that he would repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act with a better plan. Kamala Harris stated that she voted to pass the Affordable Care Act when she served in the U.S. Senate. What is your position on the Affordable Care Act?
Look, while we're waiting for a concept of a plan for replacement of the Affordable Care Act, let's first recognize that the Affordable Care Act provides coverage to tens of millions of Americans that didn't have it. It covers pre-existing conditions for millions of Americans. Is the Affordable Care Act perfect? No. But we need to improve it and not replace it. Look, the bottom line is access to health care is critically important for the American people. There are frankly too many people that are still not covered by the Affordable Care Act. So my position is simple. Unlike what we see in this Project 2025, which would eliminate the Affordable Care Act, and which is, again, the manifesto for another administration that my opponent would vote in lockstep with, right? They want a return on their investment. I say, let's improve the Affordable Care Act. Let's cover more Americans. The more Americans you cover, the more opportunities for them to go to work and to be productive members in our economy.
1 minute.
Hey, look, I want to make sure that everyone has good, affordable health care, right? I grew up again with my mom. She had restaurants. We didn't have health care. In fact, when I had to go get something because I messed myself up with wrestling, I usually had to go to Route 3 off of one of the clinics. And that's how I got my health care. And I get my health care through the VA right now. But what we need to look at is make sure look, let's be quite frank, Obamacare isn't free. Obamacare is costing about $400 to $700 per individual right now. And we look at the economy and how it is. I mean, that's hard to come by. We look at pre-existing conditions. I would absolutely support making sure that pre-existing conditions are covered and that we have transparency. When you walk into the hospital, you should know what you're paying for right off the bat. But what my opponent would support is Medicare for all. That's one of the most extreme liberal policies that you can think of. Why? It would take away the Medicare and make it almost non-existent for our senior citizens. It would increase taxes, and it would make you take away your private health insurance. So the best way we can get the best kind of health care is making sure that people have good jobs.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I guess I would say, as a recipient of government health care, my opponent has many times said he's thrilled to have it. But yet he doesn't feel like Americans overall are entitled to health care. I have a problem with that. The bottom line is the system is not perfect. The Affordable Care Act can be improved, but we need to strengthen it and not, I guess what we heard is a concept for a plan for my opponent, but no real plan and no real policy recommendations.
The next question goes first to candidate Anderson. Jake.
What would you do to ensure Social Security is available for future generations?
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we keep Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid on the books. We got to do it, especially when we have an economy that is in complete disarray right now. Look, we talk about Medicare for all. My opponent says he has no policy, but he didn't say that he wasn't willing to support Medicare for all, which would absolutely kill Medicare for our senior citizens. It would absolutely it would increase taxes, and again, it would take your private health care away. In order for us to make sure that Social Security thrives, we've got to make sure that the economy is good and make sure that we have jobs. Because quite often right now we're seeing about a quarter of people in America right now that are over that retirement age are still working. A lot of them not because they want to, because they have to, because they can't afford to live right now. We talk about the cost of housing right now and the fact that my opponent and his party want to increase the cost of your homes by $25,000 by having a first-time home buyer. Where do we pay for these things? We keep overspending in the government, and it's hurting our Social Security benefiters, and my opponent has no fix for it. His policy and his extreme policies are that he wants to continue spending. Again, he wants to tax you, he wants to spend, and again, President Biden and Kamala Harris, they did it in the first few days where they spent $7 trillion. We want any possibility that Social Security remains in place. We got to stop this spending. We got to get the economy back on track in order for people to live.
1 minute.
Look, Social Security is a safety net for millions of Americans. And so unless you can say that you're going to preserve Social Security, guess what? You're in the MAGA extremist camp in Project 2025, where the plan is to reduce Social Security benefits, okay? So we need to preserve Social Security for the elderly that rely on the program. And, you know, one of the ways to do it is there's a cap on income that is somewhere. There's a cap on income on which Social Security is taxed, right? If you lift the cap by, you know, to earners over $400,000, you're going to raise more money for Social Security, okay? So we need to preserve this program. We need to make sure that Social Security is available to our elderly, and, you know, stand firm against Project 2025. You know how you prevent Project 2025 from being implemented? Don't vote for my opponent.
30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, folks, you've heard it time and time again. My opponent is focused on his past. He's focused on his revenge towards President Trump and trying to rectify the failed policy of the Biden-Kamala Harris administration. You have heard nothing from him tonight that says anything about the fact that he cares about the people of this district or that he wants to make any changes that would make things better for the people in this district. In fact, he's talking about capping income. Look, we want to get our economy back on track. Let's start getting a balanced budget. I'd encourage my opponent to say whether or not he supports that and whether or not he'd go forth with the paycheck if we don't get a balanced budget.
The next question is an audience question, and it goes first to candidate Vindman. This will be the last question, and then we will have closing statements after that. The amount of money raised so far in this congressional election is making it one of the most expensive congressional races in America. More than $10 million already raised, and more to come in the month between now and the election. Do you think money has too much influence in politics? And if so, what should the federal government do about it?
Well, look, as a first-time candidate, I will tell you that I am surprised and frankly astonished by the amount of money in this race. It's probably the biggest surprise I've had. And, you know, I will say I'm very proud of the fact that my campaign is a grassroots campaign. With the average donation of $27, $27 is my average donation. But when you have hundreds of thousands of donors, including over 10,000 in Virginia, then you're talking about, you know, a movement. A movement is forming. So the long and short is there's too much money in politics. You know, you take it up to the presidential, the Senate and presidential level, you're talking about billions of dollars being spent. This is all as a result of a decision by the Supreme Court called Citizens United. And we need to end Citizens United. We need to pass, whether it's a constitutional amendment, we need to take actions to get rid of the dark money, the ridiculous amounts of money in politics. And let me just take 30 seconds here, because this is the last question, and my opponent has still not answered the most important question in this race. Will he defend a woman's right to reproductive health care? That is the number one question. He has dodged and dissembled all the way up. This is your chance, Derek, to answer that question. Will you restore Roe, or will you vote with your MAGA extremist bankrollers and to take away more women's rights? I don't know. We'll see.
1 minute.
Again, I'll say it again. My opponent has a revenge tour with President Trump, and he's focused on his past. He does not care about your future. If we want to talk about bankrolls, the fact that you get all your money from California, I guess that's the encouragement that you're getting is from California. Look, my campaign is a true grassroots campaign. Why? Because I'm from this district. Why? Because I know the people in this district. One of the board of supervisors, chairman of the board of supervisors in Spotsylvania County, we went to middle school together, folks. I care about this district, and that's why I'm running for office. My opponent just talked a lot about money, and he talked a lot about nothing tonight. What I'm talking about is things that are actually impacting us in the district. We didn't talk much about it, but I want to talk about the immigration issue. My opponent took his immigration policy off of his website. That's how much he cares about immigration policy. When we have 2 illegal immigrants of Jordanian descent attempt to breach the front gate of Marine Corps Base Quantico, and those 2 individuals have been released on bail. Again, you didn't hear anything from my opponent because he doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about the people in this district.
30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, so again, crickets on the most important issue in this race. But look, you know, we're going to get a chance to talk in a minute about the stark contrast between me and my opponent. And, you know, it would have been great to talk about abortion because I am for a strong, immigration, because I am for a strong border as somebody that served in national security for 25 years and worked at the White House. But we also have to recognize that we are a country of immigrants, and we can't demonize immigrants.
We're going to move to a moment with final statements. The closing statements will be first Mr. Vindman and candidate Anderson, 2 minutes each. But before I do that, I want to thank the many people who have made this event possible. Thank you, of course, to my fellow panelists, Dr. Rosalind Cooperman, Ted Schubel, and Jake Womer. Thanks. Thanks as well to our sponsors, the Student Government Association of Mary Washington, the Chamber of Commerce in the Fredericksburg area, the League of Women Voters. Thank you all. Thanks also to the Mary Washington staff who have made this possible. It's a great deal more work than you might think, but thanks so much to Susan Worrell, to Alicia Marvashti, to Amy Jesse, to Mark Simpkins, and Douglas Nobel for making this event the success that it has been. I also want to thank the students. It is a great, satisfying moment for me to find so many students willing to help with events like this, and I can feel confident that the future is in good hands with the kind of students that we see and work with here at Mary Washington. Thanks especially to William Thompson, Chadwick Yoder, Naja Wilson, Caleb Doloff, Martina Pooh, William Goodman, Sophie Desimas, and Ellie Dauerheim. Thank you all. Finally, I want to take and thank the candidates for not only attending this forum, but for being willing to run for office in the first place. As we are reminded throughout our conversation here today, it's not always sweetness and light when you run for office in politics, and it's not always a warm crowd that greets you as you offer to serve the public. So thanks to our 2 candidates. We now turn to final statements. Each candidate, of course, will have 2 minutes, and you're entitled to applaud after each one. But please be quiet during the 2 minutes when each of them is speaking. Candidate Vindman goes first, 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let me thank the panel, Professor Farnsworth, and the audience. Again, it's great to see so many people that are motivated by democracy and that are making their voices heard, voting. So thank you. Look, it would be the honor and privilege of my life to serve this district as the next congressman. I served for 25 years in the Army. During that period of time, I did a series of jobs that have prepared me, that have given me the experience, the judgment, the knowledge to serve this district from day one and serve everybody, not just Democrats or Republicans, but serve everybody. That is why when I go out and I campaign, I go to the Culpeper Rodeo and I wear my shirt. I make sure that people know I will be out there talking to everybody. That's why I go to NASCAR, Dominion Raceway, because I am committed to meeting every voter and representing you in Congress. Look, you know, the stakes in this election are pretty grave, right? We talked a little bit about Project 2025 and how this is a manifesto for a second administration by the former president. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned his name once, so I don't know. In any case, my opponent is focused on scare tactics and talking points, but there's very little substance associated with that. I think what we need to do is we need to take a step back and think about who has the knowledge, experience, and judgment to serve from day one. I'm a family man. I'm raising my family here. When, after decades of the Army telling me where to live, I decided to stay in Northern Virginia to raise my family here. I'm very proud of that. That is my motivation. My motivation is my family. And that's what I think about every day on how I can improve their lives, the lives of my friends and neighbors, my nieces and nephews, and I thank you for your time tonight.
Two minutes, Candidate Anderson.
Hey, thank you all again for having me as well. I really appreciate us being able to have a conversation and talk about things. And I want to thank my family, my fiance, my mom, my grandparents, my future in-laws for being here as well. Look, folks, again, I'm a guy from Spotsylvania County. That's where I grew up, again, working at my mom's restaurants. That's where I started my career. I graduated from Cortland High School before going to Virginia Tech on an ROTC scholarship and becoming the first person in my family to graduate from college. Again, I joined the Army, became an infantry officer, went to Ranger School, went to Iraq for 15 months as part of the surge. Before going to the Honor Guard, where I had one of the greatest honors of my life, and I was able to do the funerals in Arlington National Cemetery for those loved ones that had passed away. I then became a Green Beret, and I served for 2 Special Forces teams over the course of 5 deployments, including Afghanistan, Bahrain, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan. I went to law school and earned my degree and clerked for 2 federal judges, continuing my public service. Folks, I can't tell you enough that our world is on fire, and it began with the withdrawal in Afghanistan. Look, again, I lost 5 of my guys, so that really hits hard to me, and I can't stop thinking about how the world has turned over since the withdrawal in Afghanistan. There's no accountability, folks, and look, I'm a common sense kind of guy. What I told you about tonight is what I want to do for you, the people of the 7. I want to make it more affordable to live. I want to make sure that our communities are safe by making sure our foreign policy is strong and making sure our immigration policies are strong. Look, folks, you've heard a lot from my opponent. He's thrown smear tactics and everything else you can think of on the table. Why? Because he's focused on his past. He's focused on his revenge toward President Trump. He's focused on trying to rectify the failed policies that got us into the mess in the first place, while we're focused on your future. So again, folks, not only be an honor to represent all of you as your next member of Congress, but to represent the people in the 7th District, the people that raised me. Thank you so very much.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a pleasant evening.
Pleasure to work with you. Lovely to see you again, Ted.
Another election.
We head now to North Dakota for another debate.